Who owned the sea routes? They were never drawn clearly on any map. No fence marked their edges. No flag defined their limits. Yet these routes decided who prospered, who paid, and who was shut out entirely. Control of the sea lanes was not just about ships. It was about power, disguised as logistics. London's rise depended on water. Goods arrived by tide. Wealth followed currents. But as trade expanded beyond nearby coasts into distant oceans, a quiet question emerged at the heart of empire. Who truly owned the paths between ports? The crown claimed authority. Merchants claimed investment. Sailors claimed risk. And insurers claimed consequence. To understand why this mattered, we must return to a moment when trade outgrew tradition. Voyages became longer, cargoes more valuable, losses more catastrophic. Sea routes were no longer informal passages, followed by experience alone. They became assets, channels of predictable profit if controlled, and unbearable risk if denied. The reveal began when certain merchants realized that owning ships was not enough. The real advantage lay in controlling access. They secured exclusive agreements with ports. They negotiated protection guarantees. They influenced which routes were deemed safe, insured, or viable. Slowly, subtly, the open sea began to close. What looked like navigation was becoming governance. Those who controlled routes determined prices before goods ever arrived. They shaped insurance terms. They decided which ventures attracted capital and which were deemed reckless. Power moved upstream, away from docks and toward decisions made long before a ship ever sailed. London was no longer just trading across the sea. It was deciding who could use it. And beneath the surface of sails and tides, a struggle was forming over whether the oceans will remain open pathways or become privately managed corridors of influence. As control over sea routes tightened, London's maritime economy began to reorganize around access rather than ownership. Ships still sailed under many flags, but only certain paths were considered viable. Insurers favored proved routes. Financiers backed voyages that followed established corridors. Cargo moved where capital felt protected. The open ocean was becoming selectively navigable. This shift created immediate winners and losers. Merchant houses aligned with route controllers gained predictable returns. Their voyages faced fewer delays, lower premiums, and steadier financing. Independent traders, by contrast, found themselves priced out. Routes they had used for years were suddenly deemed too risky. Insurance vanished. Capital withdrew. Opportunity narrowed without any official prohibition. Tension rose as traders accused route controllers of monopolizing the sea without claiming it openly. The crown faced pressure to intervene, but authority at sea was diffuse. Charters granted privileges. Treaties complicated enforcement, and the line between private protection and public control blurred. The ocean resisted regulation, even as commerce demanded it. The conflict deepened when geopolitical shifts disrupted established routes. Wars flared. Alliances shifted. Ports closed unexpectedly. Those controlling access adjusted terms swiftly, rerouting capital to safer corridors. Others were left stranded. Entire regions felt the impact as shipping slowed or vanished. Control over routes became a lever capable of moving economies. Insurers played a growing role. Their assessments defined which paths were acceptable. Premiums shaped behavior more decisively than law. If insurance withdrew, trade followed. This gave route controllers indirect authority. They influenced risk models that determined insurability. The sea was governed by probability. Debates erupted across London. Was it efficiency or exclusion? Protection or manipulation? Supporters argued that disciplined routes reduced chaos and loss. Critics warned that private control over shared pathways undermined competition and sovereignty. The city grappled with a familiar pattern. Order created stability, but at the cost of openness. As more capital concentrated along approved corridors, dependence increased. If a route failed, the consequences multiplied. Flexibility diminished. Resilience weakened. What had once been a web of possibilities narrowed into a few arteries carrying enormous pressure. London sensed a danger, but could not yet see the breaking point. Control of the sea routes had delivered power, but power, when concentrated, invites challenge. And that challenge was already forming. carried on the same tides that once promised opportunity. The challenge erupted when a disruption struck one of the most heavily relied upon sea routes. A combination of conflict, weather, and political obstruction shut the corridor down with little warning. What might once have been an inconvenience now became a crisis. Too much trade depended on too few paths. Ships queued at distant ports. Cargo spoiled. Insurance claims surged beyond expectation. Financiers froze new funding as losses mounted. The efficiency gained through concentration now revealed its cost. The system had optimized itself into fragility. Independent traders saw opportunity in chaos. They attempted to reopen alternative routes long dismissed as risky, but capital hesitated. Insurers refused coverage. The architecture control resisted adaptation. Even when necessity demanded flexibility, the system could not respond quickly enough. Accusations followed. Route controllers were blamed for narrowing options too aggressively. Insurers were accused of amplifying fear. Officials questioned whether private assessments should dictate national trade outcomes. The ocean, once neutral, had become a political and financial battleground. The conflict intensified when rival powers exploited the disruption. They offered safer passages through their territories, drawing trade away from London's influence. The city faced a strategic threat. Control over routes had delivered advantage, but it had also painted a target. Merchants demanded change. They argued for diversified paths, shared risk, and reduced dependence on any single corridor. Route controllers resisted, warning that decentralization would increase losses. Both sides were correct. The debate exposed a deeper truth. The system had been built for profit, not resilience. The breaking strain came when the disruption persisted longer than expected. Temporary measures failed. Losses accumulated. Pressure mounted for intervention. The Crown, previously reluctant, recognized that sea routes could no longer be left entirely to private coordination. London stood at a crossroads: maintain concentrated control and risk systemic collapse, or redistribute access and accept higher individual risk for greater collective stability. The ocean, indifferent to ownership, forced a decision. The resolution emerged through recalibration rather than conquest. Faced with mounting losses and strategic vulnerability, London shifted its approach to the sea routes. Control was not eliminated, but it was diluted. The city accepted that no single corridor, no matter how efficient, could safely carry the weight of global trade alone. New frameworks encouraged diversification. Insurers adjusted models to reward alternative routes. Financiers spread exposure across multiple paths, rather than concentrating it. Merchants were incentivized to explore secondary corridors once dismissed as marginal. Risk increased locally, but resilience improved system-wide. The Crown formalized its role, not as owner of the sea, but as guardian of access. It asserted authority to prevent exclusive control from narrowing options too far. Private influence remained powerful, but no longer absolute. The ocean regained some of its openness, even as commerce retained discipline. London emerged stronger. Trade adapted. Capital flowed with greater caution, but greater durability. The city learned that infrastructure is not just physical, it is probabilistic. Pathways of movement must remain flexible, or they become choke points. The sea could never truly be owned, but it could be shaped. And London learned that shaping it responsibly required balancing efficiency with redundancy. From that lesson, global trade took on a new logic, one where power flowed not from closing routes, but from keeping them viable. Subscribe to join the journey. Who owns